glad that everybody could come out. I'm Vicki Moon Merchant, and I'm president of the Friends of the History Center. And it's our job to take care of the exhibits and the artifacts of those donated to us that are from Aransas County. We specifically work with Aransas County. I hope you'll take a few minutes after our talk to look at the exhibit, culinary practices or traditions of Aransas County. We've had a lot of fun doing this one. But to go on to our speaker today is John Jackson. He's a 5th generation Rockport native, and John is the founding partner of the Rockport Group. His first career, this man is not that old and he's already had 2 careers. His first career was with his family's 3-generational seafood business, where he worked in all capacities. He began his second career in 1992 with Dean Witter, which is now Morgan Stanley, and earned numerous distinctive titles and designations. He maintains the accredited investment fiduciary designation from the Center of Fiduciary Studies. He's a member of the Investment Management Consultants Association and on the board of the Association of Professional Investment Consultants. In 2012, John was awarded a 5-star Wealth Manager Award. He's active in the community with the Aransas County Independent School District Education Foundation, and we were at an opening the other day for the district, and that foundation has donated over $3.5 million to our local teachers, and we're awfully excited about that. Thank you, sir. Boy Scouts of America, South Texas Council President and Executive Board, the Rotary Club Board, the Margaret Sue Russ Foundation, who is also one of our grantees here. Without them, we couldn't do nearly as much as we have done. He's a member and has served in various capacities as the First Presbyterian Church, Odyssey After School Enrichment Program, Young Life of Rockport, Rockport Fulton Chamber of Commerce, Rockport Art Association, the Historical Society of Aransas County, 100 Club of Aransas County, Texas A&M Kingsville Foundation, Haviland Alumni Association, the College of the Business Dean's Leadership, and the most important, he's a member of the Founders Circle at the History Center. In 2012, he published Taking the Tide, which is what we're going to talk about today, a personal narrative that depicts the trials and tribulations of his family's seafood business through 3 generations, along with their ties to the rich history of Rockport. And as we have done research, it's been so much fun to contact the Jackson to get information about the time and who was here and this and that. But it's a personal narrative that depicts the trial. He shares the events and experiences that eventually led him on the path to becoming a leading financial advisor with Morgan Stanley. And we do welcome him and his family. His wife Debbie's here, and his son Colin's here, and his brother Bobby is here. So thank you for coming, and John, take it away.
I was going to introduce my family, but Debbie, raise your hand. My brother Bobby, who's in his 43rd year of teaching, most of which is Texas history. My son Colin, who was president of the Historical Commission for a couple of years. And also I wanted to point out Susie Black back there, because she's the president of the Russ Foundation, who also contributes to this facility. Thank y'all for coming. I initially when I was asked to be part of the culinary exhibit, I didn't really think it was going to fit for me, because I don't cook, I don't do recipes. I didn't see how it was going to fit, but then it dawned on me that this area's seafood industry has provided a good part of my livelihood and many others in this community. My only culinary art is I can eat with the best of them. And I'll take anybody on that category. So much of the book that we're going to talk about today lays out in some detail about how our family lived out of our place in history in this community for several generations in the seafood commercial fishing industry. I think what we're going to do today is go through all of what I want to say about this industry and a little bit about the book and some of the overview and highlights of it. Then I'm going to go through a series of slides and you can see visuals of some of the things we're talking about. Probably will not take Q&A during the thing, because we'll maybe take too long. If you want to do some Q&A afterwards, privately, one-on-one, I'd be glad to do that. But in the interest of saving your time, I'd like to just move right on through and then save that for the end. So I'm going to start by talking about some sections of the book. I don't know if any of you have read that book. Has anybody read that book? 3 or 4 people have here. We'll have an opportunity afterwards if you want to buy it. Incidentally, they're back there at $20 each, and the proceeds go to the History Center. So you don't have to worry about taking notes. You're going to get the book anyway and get all the detail you want and more. But I'm going to give you an overview and then show you the photos and then take it from there. There's also a couple of handouts on that back table. A couple of years ago, we actually got the opportunity to have a historical marker for the Jackson Maritime Companies, and it was put there in October 2015, right across the street from the Women's Club in I guess the north end of Veterans Memorial Park. And some of the narrative and application for that marker are on the back. In fact, some of you may already have them by now. And then those are yours to keep and take home as well. But you know, the question I get most often when I tell people about having been in the shrimp business for 17 years and actually grew up in it, the question I get most often is, well, what happened? And so this book goes a long way on explaining what happened. Not only to the industry, but to our family, with some kind of unique things that happened to us. So I usually don't go into an answer to that question, because it's not a short answer. I usually say, well, just read my book. But I'm going to attempt to shorten it now and give you a few highlights. I was involved in it directly over a span of 3 different decades, the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, a total of 17 years. And I was telling somebody a little while ago, I got all my gray hair by age 40 in this business. It'll do it to you. So my particular start of that journey began in 1974. I came home from college at Texas A&I University, had gotten a couple of degrees there, and came on to the family business in the 70s. The 70s was a really great time for the shrimp industry, not just here, but the entire Texas coast, Louisiana coast, Florida, and so on. So money was being made in those days. We had a fleet here in Rockport, the Cash Lines had a fleet in Fulton. There was a huge fleet in Aransas Pass, Palacios, Galveston, Port Isabel, Brownsville, all the way up and down the coast and around Louisiana, all the way to Florida. So the 70s were some good years. We built some steel boats, happened to have built them at a shipyard here in Rockport called Riceco. You'll see some photographs of that in a few minutes. So basically, fleets were ramping up in the 70s, making good money. Now let me explain something. The Gulf shrimp industry season, for all practical purposes, began about mid-July and went through the end of December, perhaps January. And so the February, March, April, May period was, you could go out, but you oftentimes couldn't make enough to even pay the bills, so to speak. So a lot of the boats would tie up during the off-season, and they made their money during those 5 or 6 or 7 months. So the reason that's important is because in the bays, the shrimp boats you see in the harbors now are mostly bay boats. They catch most of their shrimp in May and June, and even part of July, when we're waiting for the shrimp to go offshore. And most people are not aware of the fact that a shrimp has an annual cycle. The shrimp actually lay their eggs in the Gulf. And then they start to grow into small juvenile shrimp and come back into the bays in May and June. And during the May and June period of time, when they're in the bays, is when the bay shrimpers, the small boats like you see that go out for just one day at a time, they load up and get all they can. And therefore, the shrimp that are left after that eventually make it back to the Gulf, and that's where our boats and those of the Cash Lines were Gulf boats. They were too big, too heavy draft, too deep draft to be able to fish in the bay. So there was a sort of a built-in conflict between the Gulf shrimp fleet owners and the bay owners, because if you catch too many in the bay, there's fewer to make it to the Gulf. So there was that ongoing conflict for years between the fleet owners like ourselves and the day boats. The first nail in the coffin of the shrimp industry actually began, and I didn't know this much after the fact, in 1976. There was an international agreement pretty much across the board, most countries adopted it, where waters were closed to other countries coming over to your waters out to 200 nautical miles. Same thing, and so we had a 200 nautical mile area where the Mexican fleet couldn't come to Texas, for instance, and vice versa. And we couldn't go down there either. And that made a big difference because in the case of in the 60s and 70s, a lot of your shrimp boat fleets in Texas, Louisiana, and Florida, even Alabama and so on, would go down to Mexico during the off season to try to make a full year of it. No longer, that couldn't happen anymore. But the flip side of that, they couldn't come over here either. So there was a trade-off there, but nonetheless, that was a big change that had a lasting impact on the industry. Shrimp became a world food commodity, much like oil, and so the price of shrimp was pretty much dictated on a world market. And the problem with that is that the various countries we were competing against, in many cases, were subsidized by their governments, and we weren't. I mean, the farmers have had subsidies for years in the United States, but the shrimp fleet had none, no subsidy at all. So we're competing on a world shrimp market against countries where they have a distinct economical advantage. So that was one of the factors for the beginning of the end, if you would, over a period of time for the shrimp fleet owners. Obviously what that did is drive prices down because you had things like that going on, and it was very difficult. Now, there's some other factors that led to the demise of the shrimping industry as we knew it once. I mentioned already the overfishing in the bays. And by the way, the bay shrimp owners, they had to make their line of living too, so we had a respect for that. But the state had what they call statutory authority, where a bay shrimper could only catch 300 pounds a day to try to have some effort of conserving the resource. But so many of these bay shrimpers would abuse the law and hide shrimp underneath the deck or hopefully not get caught. And so there was a lot of law breaking going on. And so what happened is the state legislature stepped in and turned it over from statutory authority, which is basically politics. You go to the state house and try to get your bills passed. Something called regulatory authority, which was more driven by conservation and parks and wildlife biologists that set the limits and so on. So that was a factor that entered into it. Also, by the time the late 70s came along, interest rates were very high. Those of you who remember that probably very well. Fuel costs, we were, for the most part, operating with diesel engines. Some of them were gasoline, but most of them were diesel, and they would burn anywhere from 20 to 25 to 30 gallons of diesel per hour. So the biggest operating cost of the boat was diesel, and the labor, of course. Another thing that was a factor that we all had to deal with is lawsuits. There were a number of, I'm going to use this term loosely, shady lawyers that were out there. And at the time when we were making our pretty good money, and there was a number of illegitimate insurance claims from crew owners that would fake an injury, and the lawyer would encourage them to file a lawsuit. Of course, we had to have insurance, and that raised our insurance premiums through the roof. So that was pretty prevalent, pretty much throughout the industry. And so you maybe have 3 or 4 different lawsuits going on at the same time every year. And usually they were settled long before they went to trial. That's the way it worked. And as a result of that, you started paying a whole lot more insurance premiums. That was a big factor as well. And one of the things is when they file a lawsuit, there's a thing called the Jones Act. It's a federal part of the law. It's not a state law. So you go to federal court, and it sort of added more complications. The other thing, and I mentioned this a while ago to someone else, we had, by the time the 80s came along, even the 90s, some of you might remember, they had turtle excluder devices. And there was a faction of the government who was convinced that the shrimpers were catching these live sea turtles and drowning them, and it was going to lead to the extinction of turtles. But in all reality, our boat captains and the pasture line captains, anybody else we talked to, they maybe had caught 1 or 2 in their lifetime. And they had this vision that we were catching them almost every trip. So that was a hoax, in my opinion. It caused us to put special steel trap doors, you might say, in front of our nets so that when a turtle hit that door, it would divert it up instead of going into the net. So that was another factor. It was costly. It actually negatively impacted the ability to catch shrimp as well. So that was another of the many, many things we had to deal with. There's some things that happened to us, though, that were unique to us as opposed to everybody else in the industry that were piled on top of all of these problems. And there are actually some chapters in the book that give some detail about these industry issues, but also the things that we dealt with right here in Rockport. There's even a chapter in this book called the Miseries chapter. Let me give you an example of the few miseries. Okay, we'll wait for a start. The Jacksons, over the 60s mostly, I think it was all 60s, we suffered 3 fires in one decade. These were major fires. There was a shipyard fire in the early 60s, that probably an equivalent of a 4-story building. There was a big carpenter shop, went down one night. And there were 2 boat stall fires, which I'll show you in a minute, a photograph of where they were. And so we had, that was kind of a unique thing. And I think in the case of the boat stall fires, they were proved later to be vandals. They got in there and had been drinking and threw a cigarette or whatever. So it was a lot of bad luck there. We also suffered in a period of about 10 years, 3 major hurricanes. Okay, I'm gonna digress a little bit and tell you about the 3 hurricanes that I lived through. First one was Carla. Carla was about 1961 or 2, I believe. It came across the Gulf and hit above us near Port Lavaca. And actually at that time, I was young enough that I didn't get to stay. And my brother and I, we went to Alice, Texas to stay in an Americana motel over there and to get away because my dad had stayed back and took care of things. But when we came back, what I remember about Carla is driving to Port Lavaca and seeing shrimp boats in cotton fields. That's how high the water got up. And you could see boats out there high and dry by then. The other thing I remember is that the National Guard was in town. They stayed at Rockport Elementary, camped out there. And the main job they had while they were here was shooting rattlesnakes that floated over here in St. Joe Island. That was pretty weird, walking up and down the beach with people with these big military rifles shooting rattlesnakes. And there was a lot of boats that went into the ski basin area right there that tried to get away from the storm, and it didn't work, and they were sunk for the most part in the middle of the little bay, which is where we all did our water skiing in those days. So that was a bummer. So that was Carla. Beulah came a few years later, about 67 or 8. And the thing that I remember most about Beulah, and by this time I'm about 17, 18 years old, and I remember going down with my dad at night to check on the boats. This was a nighttime storm, by the way. And the significance of that is this. CP&L, who had the power base here, turned all the electricity off, and it was obviously overcast. You could not see your hand in front of your face. And we're down at the harbor in knee-deep water, actually more like thigh-deep water, which is the tide coming out of the basin into the harbor there, into the land. And a couple of things happened that night that I have never forgotten. One, there was a fire on Key Allegro. Key Allegro started around early 61 or 2, I believe. There's 67 or 8, we're having Beulah, and there's the night sky lit up. And what it was, there was a fire over there, so one of the houses caught fire, and of course the fire trucks couldn't get to it. So it just kept burning, and it lit up the sky. That was a memorable thing for me, at least. And then we're down there wading around in thigh-deep, and I'm probably 6 feet tall by then, in thigh-deep water, and the boats had to be constantly loosening the ropes or tightening the ropes because the tide's going up and down to keep them from hitting up against the bulkhead. But at that time, most of our boats were wooden boats. So to hit the bulkhead or a piling that could rub a hole in the boat and sink it. So we're out there in the middle of the night in the dark, you know, adjusting these lines in thigh-deep water, and then all of a sudden, within 5 minutes, the water dropped from thigh-deep to ankle-deep. We had no idea what happened. It was freaky. Didn't know until the next day what happened. My dad was on the city council here for about 20 years, and that particular time there was a guy named Delmer Hiller who was our mayor. And I got to go to City Hall the next day with my dad after the storm. And Delmer Hiller had a Jeep. And I got to go ride with him up to Fulton, where a tornado had come through Fulton and cut a 100-yard swath right through Castelline, all through town, went up to Lillian's Dance Land, and just basically everything left was toothpick size. Then we figured out what happened the night before. That tornado had come across Aransas Bay and sucked all the water out. And then it came back. We didn't know at the time, but it was real obvious the next day what happened that night. So that was kind of an interesting storm. We didn't have any losses of boats. We had a little bit of damage. We lost the boat stalls, I think, that time too. But there was not a whole lot of damage because we stuck with it through the night. And then, August 3rd, 1970 was the big one, Hurricane Celia. Again, my brother and I, Bobby and I, came back from Boy Scout camp. We worked on the camp staff up there at Mathis, and came back and helped my dad during this storm, which was a daytime storm. And there's going to be some photographs I'll show you in a few minutes of the damage that we've suffered in that one. That was a big one. And we have not had really a big storm since 1970. So we're way overdue. I've been saying that about 20 years, but it's still way overdue. But that was a tough one. There's a lot of detail in the book about these storms, even more than what I shared with you, but I did want to kind of digress for a minute and share those, because you had 3 fires, 3 hurricanes, and all the stuff I've been talking about. And then, in 1970, later that year, Bobby and I are both off to college. And our grandfather, who started the business in 1919, he died. He was, lived to his mid-80s. But 12 or 14 days later, my uncle died. My dad's younger brother. He had cancer at age 53, I believe. So all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, 2 of the 3 partners were gone. And my dad's by himself. I'm away at college. I'm the only one in the family that had an interest in the business. He just couldn't wait for me to get out of college and come help. But I still had 3 more years to go at that time. So a lot happened in that decade. The hurricanes, the fires, and then the 2 deaths. On top of everything else the shrimp industry was going through. So I came home from college in 1974, joined my dad, and spent the next 17 years in the shrimp business. There's a chapter in the book called Survival Decade, and there's also a Shallows chapter. The 80s started the beginning of the shrimp industry, in my opinion, as we knew it at least with the Gulf shrimp fleets. A number of things happened in ours. I'm not going to kind of give you a little rundown of what happened. In the late 70s, we've been doing really well in the shrimp business. We decided, let's don't have all our eggs in one basket. Let's try to get some fisheries outside of the U.S. that we're not all dependent upon the Texas shrimp industry. There was a few people from Aransas Pass and other places who had gone out to Virginia a few years before that and got into the deep sea scallop fishery. Now the scallop boats were probably more than twice as expensive as the Gulf shrimp boats. A lot more electronics, deeper, wider beam, more everything, bigger engines, everything. So we decided to try that. We got so excited about it, my older brother NF, who was a lawyer here in town, he was a partner with Lola Bonner here in Rockport, he quit his law practice and joined us. He'd been in family law practice with Lola for about 3 years and saw an opportunity that I don't think he was that crazy about family law at that time anyway, because it was mostly about divorces and child abuse and stuff like that. So he comes and joins us, and we built 5 big scallop boats, some of them at Riceville and some of them at a place called St. Augustine Trawlers in St. Augustine, Florida. And we took 5 of our boats and 8 others that joined us, 13 boats, to Newport News, Virginia. We kept our Texas shrimp boats here, but we took scallop boats to Virginia, so we had 2 operations. My older brother went over to Virginia to kind of run that operation. My dad and I would go back and forth. We had a local port captain named Tommy Webb. We arrived in Virginia August of 1979. That year, the scallops disappeared, down to about 1/3 of what they had been in all the years prior. 79, if those of you who remember this, there's a lot of people here with gray hair, so I know you remember this. 1979, interest rates were close to 20%. Remember that?
Yes.
We had a mortgage on those boats at around those numbers. Fuel. No scallops. The hand right was on the wall. Plus, we got the boats late. We had hydraulic problems, which they had to, so we basically missed the first season. And we're over there and not even generating enough money to service the debt, much less make money. So we were there less than a year. We brought the fleet home. Well, yeah, we brought the fleet home and decided, you know, we're going to do something with these boats, but you couldn't. Normally, you could take a boat and sell it somewhere else in another fishery, because if you were having a bad, you know, resource that year, whether it's scallops or shrimp or whatever, you could always sell to some other fishery that was doing real well. Not this time, because everybody was faced with high interest rates and high fuel. It didn't matter what fishery you were in. So you couldn't sell boats. You couldn't operate them in the Texas shrimp fishery because they're too expensive. So what could we do? Well, what we did, my brother and I, NF and I, took about, I think it was roughly 18 days. We went through Central and South America, starting at the Mexican Embassy in Mexico City, trying to find a home to operate these boats, okay? And we were hoping to find a place where we could get cheaper labor, cheaper fuel, and all that stuff too. Started in Mexico City, went through Honduras, Costa Rica, Panama, Guatemala, wound up of all places in Cartagena, Colombia. We found a good family-run business over there named Vikingos. And they had a shipyard, they had a shrimp freezing plant, they were U.S. educated, fluent in English, although they were Colombians. There was no drug trade, it was really legitimate business. We took the 5 scallop boats and our 8 shrimp boats to Cartagena, Colombia in 1981, using for the most part Texas Hispanic boat captains who could communicate with Colombian crews. So the advantage was we were going to have cheaper crews, lower fuel cost, and go down there and survive. 81 turned out to be the all-time record shrimp harvest of Texas. We're in Colombia. In addition, the financial institution that financed our scallop boats wasn't too happy with their collateral being outside the United States. That plus the problem with the fuel, the Colombian crews and the Hispanic boat captains from Texas, the cultures were so different, they didn't work. We thought it would, it didn't. Brought them all back home. We were there just a few months. My brother at the time was there as well, and he became darn near bilingual in that period of time. We couldn't get parts down there, it was a mess. So it was another problem we had to deal with. Brought the boats home, basically gave the 5 scallop boats back, so to speak, and created a huge deficit. Golly, I'm sorry about that. We had a huge deficit in the debt that we had to absorb personally, personal guarantees, and spent the rest of the decade trying to dig out of the hole that we dug for ourselves in the scallop industry. Again, bad timing. The resources for the scallops came back within a couple of years, but we couldn't wait around for 2 years for it to happen. There was no place to make you couldn't operate the boats in the shrimp fishery. You couldn't sell them anywhere else. We were stuck. So we had a business reorganization as a result of all that. And as I said, spent the whole decade of the 80s digging up in that hole. So as you can start to see, we've had some rough luck. Then, to make matters worse, we had some valuable property. But you all know where it is. I'll show you. Now it's the Bath property. Then in 1983, and there's a lot of detail in the book about this, we got a registered letter from the Ranges County Navigation District claiming that they owned our land. That was a surprise. And I'm going to tell you some detail about how we dealt with that. But spent 3 years, 83, 4, 5, and actually part of 6, I basically spent 2/3 of my time in the courthouse doing paralegal work for the attorneys we hired to fight them on that issue. Because it turned out, long story short, they were wrong, we were right, we settled it. But it took about 3 or 4 years out of my life, as well as my dad's too, to try to fight that. And we couldn't begin to get out of this mess if we didn't have clear title to our property. There's a whole lot in the book about that. It's a pretty interesting story. That happened from 83 to 86. We also, as mentioned earlier, the time that we had in the off season, we were trying to do something to try to keep the boats from tied to the dock. You don't make any money then. We got into calico scalloping, which is a different scallop fishery altogether. We actually use our regular shrimp boats. You use a net instead of a dredge. And we went to Cape Canaveral, Florida in the off season in 87 and 88. And my dad and I would go back and forth. And for about 4 or 5 months, we were catching calico scallops. There's going to be a photograph in a few minutes about that. It's very different than deep sea scallops. We also tried bottom long lining for snapper and grouper off the Texas coast. We actually put 5 miles of steel cable on our winches and we put up this long line that went basically like a trot line that's on the bottom, and you reel it back after a while and you've got snapper and grouper. We did that in the off season for 2 years. We actually did long lining for swordfish 1 year with one of our boats. So we were experimenting. We were basically in a survival mode that whole decade. In addition to all that, anybody who lived through the 80s in Texas or the United States for that matter and survived, that was a tough, tough decade. You had the S&L prices, oil and gas prices. I remember oil got to $6 a barrel in the early 80s. The real estate prices, interest rates were still high, the shrimp industry is going down. Tough, tough decade. And if somebody was in business and survived it, they probably did pretty darn well because it took a lot to survive that. And then to make matters worse, for me at least, that's when we started our family. Our daughter came to us in 81, Colin came along in 85, in the middle of all this. So we're trying to raise a family living in Cartagena, Cape Canaveral, Newport News, and it was tough, but there was nothing you could do about it. You had to do something. So that was tough. Then, I will say this, in 86 was a decent year. That was 1 year I happened to be president of the chamber, and Susie can attest to this because she was there with me every step. We had a good shrimp year that year, and if we hadn't have had a good shrimp year, there's no way I could have done what I was able to accomplish that year. So that was the only thing I can say good about the 80s is that one thing. We actually made money 2 out of 10 years in the 80s. The rest of it was either nothing or losing money. By the time the late 80s came along, it became apparent to me that there's not going to be a long-term shrimp future in the shrimp industry. And even my dad, who'd been in it all his life, was beginning to agree at that time. But what are you going to do to get out of this business? So that's when I started this vision that I had in the late 80s of our waterfront property being something else besides an industrial site, more like a mixed-use waterfront development. Now, the shipyard next to us was called Ricego. We had 7 acres of land. Ricego was right next to us with 9 acres, some of which was leasehold. But altogether, 16 acres of downtown waterfront, 3,200 lineal feet, 16 acres of downtown waterfront in the middle of downtown. You could put your arms around it. And it was in walking distance of the Art Center, the Maritime Museum, the Rockport Beach, the arts and crafts, all the retail shops and everything. It's just a great, so I started putting together a vision for a mixed-use waterfront development. But my timing, again, was bad. By the time this was happening, late 80s, people who had money were not putting in real estate then. People who had been in real estate were broke. Great idea, lousy timing. So, and I couldn't find any money, any investors to try to develop this property. Picked up the phone one day and called Perry Batts. And the reason I did is because he and his whole family had a long history of helping and be a part of Rockport. They owned San Jose Island. You know, the Maritime Museum wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Perry Bass. Our EMS wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Perry Bass, and the whole family for years has done a lot of quiet things in this community. And he knew my father personally. And I actually got to meet Mr. Bass as well, because back when we had the navigation district lawsuit, Mr. Bass was going to give testimony in our behalf, because they had leased some land from us way back a long time ago. I'll go into that in a few minutes. Bottom line is, he said, yeah, I'll take a look. So, long story short, in '89, he sent one of his real estate man to Rockport. By that time, I had gotten the Ricego property under contract because they were having their own problems because they were building shrimp boats, but they couldn't anymore, and they were owned by an oil and gas company in San Antonio. They were in worse shape than we were, actually. So I was able to get their property under option and basically went to Mr. Bass with 16 acres, which they bought. And most of you probably know this. In October of 1990, we closed a deal with the Bass family, and now they own all that property. The reason that's important to this story is because that sale extinguished our debt, which we accumulated with the Scott Brothers. Now, we didn't come away with any money. We were basically even, but at least out of all that debt. That was the first of 2 home runs we hit in '89 and '90. Okay, we're wanting to get out of the shrimp business, but what can you do with the shrimp boats? You can't give them away. Everybody was having the same problems. So what do we do? We had 8 shrimp boats at the end, 6 steel boats and 2 wood boats. You could not give them away. We got the property sold out of debt, but what do you do with these boats? Here's what we did. Years ago, there was a president of Mexico named De La Madrid. This goes back, I forget how many years ago, probably 30 some odd years ago, maybe 40. He nationalized the whole country of Mexico, which means that the government took over all the private businesses. The only thing left that way now is Pemex. But every business became government owned under his tenure. And that created an opportunity for us. Because think about it. Government-owned shrimp fleets, because there's a lot of fleet owners down there too, turned into rust buckets because they didn't know how to maintain them. It just doesn't work when the government tries to run business. Y'all know that. Okay. So guess what? Wait, let me back up a second. After De La Madrid leaves power, Carlos Salinas becomes the president of Mexico. Carlos Salinas was a Harvard-educated MBA, fluent in English guy, president of Mexico. He was a free enterprise thinker. So guess what he did? He re-privatized the country. Everything went back to the private sector, including the prior disposed of shrimp fleet owners. And we found out about this early enough in that tenure of his tenure, because I served on the Texas Shrimp Association Board of Directors, and so had my dad, and we had contacts in Brownsville and Port Isabel who still had contacts in Mexico. Well, there was a family down there named Ramirez in Ciudad del Carmen who was wanting to get back in the shrimp business, but they didn't have any boats. So it created a demand for used shrimp boats. Well, guess who had a fleet of them? So early enough in that, we got kind of an early start on that. And if you've ever had any dealings in Mexico, the red tape there is much worse than here. You take the red tape here and this bureaucracy, you about triple what you got in Mexico. So it took almost a year to make that sale. But in June of '91, our whole fleet sailed to Mexico. I haven't seen them since. So that was a home run. The bass sale was the first home run. The fleet sale was the second one, and those were the things that it took a lot of perseverance and persistence and all that to make all that happen. But that was where we made the transition. We got out. We had to help with cleaning up the property. I spent a short time working for Mr. Bass for a year, and then decided he had what I call patient money, which means he was not any interested in doing anything soon. And as you know, it's been, 26 years and it's still sitting down there. So I decided at that time to change careers, because I wasn't going to wait for Mr. Bass. But basically, I started over at age 41 from a career with nothing. A house, a wife, a couple of cars, and 2 kids at age 41. So I had to start over. And it was a freaky time to do that. Some of you may have done the same thing, but what I'm going to do now is kind of go through some photographs. But before I do, let me share with you a few other things too. The book is primarily about things like working hard, work ethic, overcoming obstacles, persistence, never giving up. Also a lot about heritage. There's a chapter in the book called The Voyage of Our Life, and that's where I get into some of the family stuff. A lot of it's the business, but there's also a lot of family stuff. And let me share this with y'all. In 1906, my great uncle was named Roy Jackson. He came here and bought land on the Rockport boat harbor. And his brother, who was my grandfather, was Stephen Ford Jackson. And they started off with Jackson Brothers Fish Company around that time, around the turn of the century. And then by 1919, my great uncle Roy left Rockport and moved to Sinton. What happened there? He had a son that drowned in Rockport Boat Harbor, and he never got over it. So he left and became a banker in Sinton, a very prominent banker. And so my grandfather took over in 1919, bought the business from him, I believe, and started what became Jackson Seafood Company. And then, of course, there were 2 sons, my dad, Norval, and his brother, Jim, and three sisters. But anyway, so he started the company, and of course my dad and uncle went off to World War II and came home, and after that joined their father in Jackson Seafood and spent the next several decades in the business after World War II. But actually the Jackson heritage goes back farther than that, because my dad's maternal grandmother came here in 1888. Elisha and Irene Norval. If any of you have been to K-Bob's, their photographs are in there. They're also in the book. It's the young couple right there when you're in the dining room. Big old photograph. That's Mr. and Mrs. English Norval. Came here in 1888 with the advent of the railroad. San Antonio Rangers Pasture Railway came in 1888. They were with the railroad. That's what brought them here. Our ancestral home that they lived in is about the 4th house on the right after you turn right on Water Street. There's a historical marker there, and there's people named White that live there now. So there's a called the Baylor Normal Home, is our ancestral home. My great-grandmother, we called her Nana. Irene was her name. She published memoirs. She didn't publish, she wrote handwritten memoirs. And we still have them in her handwriting. And there's so much treasure of stuff there that she created for the history of our family is priceless. One of the things that stands out, and one that Bobby's famous for, is the 1919 hurricane, because she wrote a very detailed minute-by-minute depiction of the 1919 hurricane. It's in her memoirs, and Bobby does a presentation before his students every year on where he gets to actually portrays my great-grandfather. A few more things before I get to the photographs. I'll be able to show you a photograph in a few minutes, but the harbor you see there, prior to 1939, was not there. It was just open bay. Think of it as open bay. But in 1930, remember the railroad came in 1888. 1930, my grandfather bought a railroad pier that went out beyond the jetties and all into the bay. Now the railroad didn't go out over the water, but the railway did. And the reason they had it that way is because they would take carts that were on railway tracks and push them out there by hand to offload shrimp and oysters, things like that off the boats. So think about it. That pier's sticking out there, and by 1939, the navigation district is formed by then. They actually formed in 26. They wanted to build a harbor. They wanted to dredge the harbor you see there. But they got to cut my grandfather's pier first, right? Well, they got to make a deal. They had a Mr. A.C. Glass, Travis Bailey, and Mr. Picton, three other commissioners at the time, and they walked out on that pier in 1939 with my dad, who was in his late 20s by that time, and my grandfather was there, and a man named Bill Bauer, who was the man who dredged Rockport Boat Harbor in the late 30s. And they walked out there to make a deal. They all walk out on this pier, and they make a big red X. Remember my dad told me about this. Big old red X on the pier, which marked where my grandfather was willing to let them cut his pier to dredge the harbor. But he was going to get something for it. It was going to be for nothing. He made a deal: if you're going to cut my pier, I want the dredge spoil on my land. Would basically give us more land, right? Well, they shook their hand. Like that's all you did in those days, to shake hands. You didn't have to put anything in contract form in those days. And that was good enough for over 40 years. And it was that agreement that was not actually put in contract form, although there were witnesses there, which is the way we beat the Navigation District lawsuit 40 years later. It's all in the book. But that's a pretty interesting thing. And the reason that I've got a photograph on my wall in my office of that harbor right after it was dredged in 1940. And Mr. Bauer, we had gone to take his deposition because he was the one who could attest. My dad couldn't, because he was an interested party. We had to get a third party, and Mr. Bauer was the one who did that. So that's how all that worked out. In 1935, we started a company called Jackson Channel and Dock, which basically is similar to the Navigation District. The state at that time was giving state charters where you could actually have a private company do their own docks and piers and dredging and that sort of thing. The 1939 boat harbor, I just mentioned all that. In the 1940s, 41, my dad and mother got married in early 40s. My dad became a Texaco consignee here in Rockport. He actually, sold Texaco fuel, if you will, for a couple of years. And when World War II started, he enlisted in the Army Air Force in 1942 and took off to war, turned over his business to a man named Hugh Morrison while he was gone. And another little sideline there, my sister was born in 42 while my dad's in service. He got to come home during training in California and see his daughter. briefly before he went back to war and spent his time in England and also North Africa. Then my dad came back from World War II along with his brother, joined their father in business. Interesting thing about that, which is sort of interesting, I think, at least, about 10 years ago, I found in the attic or somewhere a box of old letters that my dad wrote to his mother, 90 different letters over the time he was at war. So he wrote pretty often, handwritten letters. So I got to read my dad's letters. My dad had passed away a year before that. I got to read his letters one weekend in August of about 10 years ago and just could not believe what he said and the way he depicted the war and how important it was to look after his wife. He was dedicated to his mother because he's writing to her all the time. And some of the words he used and the language and his illustrations of things was just the way he was in his 70s and 80s. And it was already showing up in his 20s. That was kind of a neat thing for me. And incidentally, some of that stuff is in the book as well. I'm going to get through the family and we'll head to the photos. My grandfather was a mayor of Rockport for a while. In the 50s and 60s, in addition to the shrimp plant we had there, we actually had a company called Jackson Marine Services. We built an ice plant. We manufactured ice, which we sold to the boats and also gave away some of it to the community. We also had a shipyard. It was called Rice. The Rice brothers had a shipyard before Riceco was here, and we actually sublet, or we leased that shipyard for several years, and we actually built some boats. Did marine railway haul-outs, and when I was in junior high and high school, worked there sometime in the summer. So we did that. We had the shrimp operation, we had the marine services, we had a marine supply store, we had a welding shop, shipyard, marine supplies, all that in addition. So basically, the business for all those years supported 3 Jackson families, and incidentally had 17 first cousins on the Jackson side. So that was all part of the process. My mother had a passion for the arts, and she got that from my great-grandmother. My mother was an artist under Simon Michael. She was an organist at our church. My great-grandmother was also a very artistic person, very active in the church, civic endeavors. My dad, the best way to explain my dad is he was a workaholic, and I inherited that from him, and so did Bobby, and all of us did, I guess. He led by example, and it wore off on all of us. We were also dedicated in scouting, real passion, and to this day. I got very active in several community endeavors in those years. One of them was the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to show that in a little bit. There's a photograph which I'll show you all about that. Historical preservation has been a big part of our lives. Bobby's been in teaching it all these years. I was one of the co-founders of the Historical Society back in 82. Anyway, Colin's been a president of the Historical Commission. So we've all been involved in it. My brother Inet is very much involved now, especially now that he's retired. So he's gotten very much involved in all this stuff. But I'll tell you what, there's a chapter in this book that actually is one of the best ones in it. It's one that Debbie would have a role in. The chapter is entitled "Stand by Your Man." And I had some help writing this book. I knew, even though it was interesting to do this, that I'd never stop and do it. I mean, I've been hearing for years, like 20 years, you ought to write a book about all the stuff you went through. I said, yeah, I know, but when am I going to do that? And so what I did is years ago in '97, I was president of the Art Association here. And that year, one of the things we did is we, almost going to do that again. We hired Sue Hastings and Bill Allen to write the history of Aransas County. And so I got to know Sue real well because I was in the committee that picked her. And years later, I'm in the investment business, And she's a client of mine, and I reached out to her in late 2009. I said, Sue, would you have an interest in helping me write a book about my family history and all that? She says, you better believe it. I said, well, cool. So I hired Sue to write my book. About a third of it I actually wrote myself because it was too personal for anyone else to write. But she would come to my office on Sunday afternoons, sit around a small round conference table and turn the recorder on, and I'd start talking. And then she'd take notes. And she'd write a chapter, and I'd edit it, and then she'd write. We did that for 18 months. And had our book signing for this book that you're talking about today in May of 2011. So obviously, she gets a lot of the credit for the writing skills, pulling it all together, something I probably would never have stopped to do myself. So, but it's basically, it's not really a family history. It's a story of our family's journey, and not a complete life story. If I was to try to do that, it wouldn't be that much different from anybody else's life story, so it'd be kind of boring. People wouldn't read it. But there's a lot of aspects of this particular book that I think do kind of capture your attention. Those of you who read it kind of know what I'm saying. But I wanted to preserve it for future generations. One of the main reasons I did this book to begin with is this. I lost all 4 grandparents of mine between age 18 and 22. Think about it, 18 to 22. I'm in college, starting my own life, playing college football, dating, partying, all the stuff people do at that age, right? Then you think about the fact that I had 17 first cousins on the Jackson side. I think there's 13 on the Porter side. And every time you get together with your grandparents, you've got all this competition from the other grandchildren. The result of that is I really never got to know my grandparents very well until they were gone. And I realized, whoa, by the time I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, I would so much like to go back to them and ask them, why did you do that? How come you did it that way? But I missed that opportunity, and I'm to blame for that. But I didn't want my kids and grandkids to have to say that. So a good part of the reason for this book is because of that right there. So it was a kind of a labor of love in that regard. So it was basically an attempt to preserve our family's heritage for generations. So that's why we did it. As far as the property goes, if you think about it, there's nothing like what we have in Rockport from Brownsville to Key West. Try it someday. It doesn't exist. You go from here right up the coast, Palatka, Palacios, Seadrift, Galveston, Louisiana, keep on going through Mississippi all the way to Key West. It doesn't exist where you have that kind of property in a downtown setting in a protected boat harbor with that much lineal footage of waterfront. It's close enough to everything. So someday there's going to be one heck of a development on Rockport Boat Harbor, and with the Basses in control, I think it'll be quality, and it'll be a game changer for Aransas County. I just hope I live to see it. What I'm going to do now is go through some slides and show you some photographs and probably make it a whole lot more interesting than I talk. And thanks to Colin, I have a clicker here. Just a second here. Let me get this. Give me a second here.
Pull the bottom.
Okay,
On the bottom slide. There you go.
Okay. That's basically a photograph that shows you kind of what you know right now. If you've been in Rockport, you've seen, basically you see it right there, the property we're talking about. And let me get over here where I can see better. Basically this part right here is the Jackson properties. All this was called Riceco. There's actually a motel down here which was not part of it, but that's Riceco. So basically the 16 acres I talked about goes about right here and all there. Then, that's a very interesting chart. It's in the book also. And the neat thing about that, and that's what we've probably taken in the 40s, folks, but that really dark, heavy line is basically the original shoreline. That's Rocky Point. And that's how Rockport got its name. The La Playa Hotel was out there and all the things you've probably read about. Go ahead.
Isn't this where Daily Grind is and John Martell at Merchant Square?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Del Mar Hotel would be down here. I think that's, or they were part of it.
I think they were part of that Merchant Square, yeah. But anyway, you can see all these buildings out here, piers and so on, but that was the original shoreline. So all the dredging that took place to make the harbors is what gave us all that. There was even, you know, historical fact, Zach and Taylor went ashore at Rocky Point, John Wood shipped cattle, you had the Del Mar Hotel, La Playa Hotel, the Bailey Pavilion, the old First National Bank and all that. Now, probably need somebody else doing this part. That's Riceco. Now, unless you've been here for a few years, you probably didn't know that was there. That's right behind, well, it's kind of behind the same area we've been talking about. That was their main fabrication building. They could put 2 or 3 boats inside there. They had all the outside facility as well. And at one time, that shipyard probably had close to 300 employees. And that's a big company for Rockport, Texas, right? Gone. That's our original letterhead. We had a supply and service division and the seafood production division. It's all listed right there. This is a pre-1958 photograph. I want to point out this right here. This is a Quonset hut. That was a very common building that came out of World War II. These are the boat stalls. They burned twice. That was the Morrison boat stall right there. There's a place where we built some boats there. There's a machine shop right there. And all the stuff you're seeing right there was taken out in Hurricane Celia. I'll show you some photos of that in a minute. This is a 1970s area photo. This dock right here was built by Chuck Vermillion, Vicki Merchant's father. And that's our marine supply store, built in 1978. This building right here, you can see from anywhere in downtown Rockport. It's a very tall building, concrete block, and it had tons and tons of ice in it from our ice plant. And you can see some of the boats. Now this vantage point from this photograph is basically Veterans Memorial Park looking out towards the bay. Okay, now look at this next one. Recognize that? Anybody remember that? That's the 1994 Rockport Art Association Festival artwork poster. And that's a boat owned by Danny Dutnick, and there's that same building right there behind it. Same vantage point.
Is that Steve Russell?
That's Steve Russell. 1994 Art Festival poster. This is on Austin Street looking north. Now over here on this side, you can barely see that green there. That's where Western Auto was. Today, latitude 2802 is sitting right there. Right straight across the street is the entrance to the property. It's not showing up there. But you see where it says Max's Tackle Shop? We have to be between there and the Seashell Shop with entrance to our property. And you can see across here, no, not showing up. You can barely see right here. That's the railroad tracks that went across all the way down to the harbor. That's a photograph of our fuel dock. There's one of our boats being fueled up right there. To the left of that is the machine shop we had. This is not working, is it?
I think it's the lighting. I can see it.
Okay.
Can y'all see it back there? We can change the lighting.
No, it's shining in the glass case from here.
We can turn off the, Tom, you can turn off the
track lights. They're right there, the second one underneath the poster. To the right, to the left.
I see it over here, but I don't see it on the photograph, so maybe it's not gonna work. Anyway,
It's reflecting over this direction.
it
You can
is.
see it fine.
Y'all can see it?
Yeah.
I can't. I can't see it at all from
We
here.
can't see it at all.
All right, I'm just gonna tell y'all what we're looking at. There's a shrimp boat there behind it called the Kelly J. That's named after my niece, Kelly. The building in front of that was our shrimp facility, shrimp house, if you will. Let's keep on going. This is a typical Riceboro shrimp boat. It's got the big winch in the middle of it. That's 5/8 inch cable, about 1,200 feet long on each drum. The doors behind it, we call them trawl doors. And all the ropes there, that's part of the configuration of the shrimping rigs. Typical boat of ours. This is the big cylinder tank in the middle there is our 100,000 gallon diesel fuel tank we had at the time in the 80s. To the right of that is a net rack, which we had to tar our nets and hang them up to dry, and that's what that facility is there. We actually fixed nets and also fabricated nets. That's a 1970s era photograph of our building. You can tell by the vehicles how old they are. The big building in the back is our ice vault in the back side of it. The offices were in that up right to the front there. This is inside our ice vault. That happens to be my Uncle Jim Jackson on the left. And Gene Carter. Some of y'all might know Gene Carter Jr. He lives here in town. His father worked for us for many years. And there was probably no telling how many dozens of high school boys who worked their summers in that ice vault shoveling ice. There's some floor conveyors at the bottom of that floor that you should move the ice into that would then go into another conveyor that would go through a blower and put ice on the boats. That's actually me standing there counting shrimp, probably late 70s. You can see behind me there's a conveyor, two sets of conveyors where shrimp are coming off of the boat onto a weighing scale, and then two boxes that go on a truck. This is a shot of our facility in Newport News, Virginia. You can see a scallop boat in the very back there, and that's our building to the left. That's a scallop dredge. There was one of those on each side of the boat. Instead of having a net, you had a 12-foot wide steel dredge, and those rings are 3/8 inch steel rings. Pick those big old deep sea scallops up with. Kind of a dangerous fishery, actually. That's one of our scallop boats, named after Debbie's mother. Debbie's father owned that boat. Unfortunately, 82 days after it went to sea, it sank. Now, if you want to learn what happened, read the book. It's a testy story. Actually, it turned out Gerald Carlisle, her dad was Gerald, came out better than all the rest of us because his boat sank. I'm serious. Okay. This is the operation in Cartagena, Colombia, where we had our fleet. None of those are our boats, but that's where they were, that facility there. Now this is a calico scallop. Instead of putting the scallops inside the fish hold and down below decks, you put them on top of the deck. And there's a boat captain standing on top of the big, this is an 80-foot boat, okay? The whole back deck's nothing but little bitty calico scallops. And what they do, they unload them at the dock. They go out for just one day, come right back. Unload them with a big clam dredge, if you will. Goes into a big conveyor into a steam facility that opens them up automatically from steam. And what comes out is a little scallop about the size of a dime. And you put them in gallon jugs and sell them all over the world. So we did that for 2 years. That's a swordfish being unloaded off of one of the boats. Swordfish, we did one of that with one of our boats. That's that same building I showed you a while ago, beyond Max's Tackle. And the reason I showed it to you, because inside that building for a while, we actually did one more thing. Those are soft shell crab tables. In the tables, there's water circulating from the basin in Rockport Boat Harbor through PVC pipes and motors and pumps. And there's crabs in there. And I didn't know until I got into this business, we only did it for a short while, that the way you get soft shell crabs is because all crabs eventually molt. And the way they molt is they back out of their shell and they're soft for about 24 hours. And then they get hard again. So you have to monitor these things 24 hours a day. And we had one of our guys that worked with us, and we was like around the clock. And if they started bolting, you had to get them out to make a soft shell crab, or they got hard again. Well, that turned out to be not a too profitable business, so we didn't stay with it very long, but that was an interesting thing. I always wondered where you got soft shell crab. That's how they do it. Those are blue crabs too, by the way. This is shrimp and agriculture, shrimp farm. We never got into that, but we looked at it one time down west of Rockport on 188 off to the side. You see the shrimp farms out there. We didn't do any of that though. We did some lobbying. Can anybody pick me out of that photograph? Bobby can. I'm the one with the beard. One of the few times I wore a suit. We did a lot of lobbying for the fishery, if you will, not only in state but also in the nation's capital. That's Congressman John Breaux with the darker suit in the middle from Louisiana. On the far left is Sidney Herndon, big fleet owner from Ranges Pass. Then to me, Bobby Clay from Fort Lavaca is right there with the glasses on. Then Congressman Breaux, Julius Collins, just next, he's from Brownsville. Walter Zimmerman, the next guy from Port Isabel, and Al Silkenstein, who is from Rockport, is the guy on the far right. We're trying to do some lobbying there. That's my dad in roughly 1940. He was a chief of the fire department here, and that's him at the wheel of that fire truck. If you go into K-Bob's to the salad bar, look to the right, and that photograph is right there. He was very active in the volunteer fire department before he went on to World War II. That's the Quonset hut the day after Hurricane Celia. Turned into a pretzel. That's the boat stalls the day after Hurricane Celia. Just demolished. That's my dad in England. He worked as a technical aircraft inspector on the B-24s in World War II. That's Jackson Channel and Dock. And you can see there's a Jackson Island there because we actually had an island out there before there was even a harbor. And this right here is the railroad wharf that they had to cut to dredge that harbor. This is the harbor in July of 1940. It was dredged in 39-40, and I think they dedicated on July 4th of 1940. And you can see there's no buildings around there. It's all white sand because the dredge spoil was fresh. And all this area right here was the upland land that we gained by doing the dredging. So that was the way we got that. And you can see right here, this is what's left of the railroad pier, all the way across here. It's still there. In fact, if you fly over it today, you can still see pilings in the water. That is the end of an era. The Irene J, which was one of our boats. We named all of our boats after women in the family. That's the day that the last boat went around the jetties to Ciudad del Carmen, Mexico. And there was an article in the paper about the end of an era. This is where I transitioned to a new business in Lilo Plaza for a few years, then moved over to Trailer Boulevard in this building. That's my great-grandparents that came here in 1888. That's the photograph that's in K-Bob's. Elisha and Irene Norval. They had one child, and guess what her name was? Irene. So the mother and the daughter were named Irene Norval. Confusing, right? But that was pretty typical in those days. That's my grandfather on the left, Stephen Ford Jackson. He was mayor for a while. This is my grandmother. my dad's mother, and of course the Irene J was, the first Irene J was a wood boat, and she's standing in front of it. This is 1954, I think. My dad on the far left, my mother next to him, my sister on the far right, Mary Lucille. NF is to the far left, you know, the other side of her, and then Bobby and I are sitting on the hood of that car. Any resemblances? Probably
I'm
not.
the cute one.
And that closet, that's my mother's parents, John Duncan and Neva Miles Porter. This is my dad on the far right, my grandfather and my Uncle Jim. They're plotting something there at that desk. No telling what it was at that time. That's probably in the 50s maybe. That's my dad and mother with their baby daughter, Mary Lucille, probably right after she was born while he was in service. That's Debbie and I, 41 years ago, walking down the aisle. We got married in Dallas, Texas. That's Sarah and Colin in about 1987. Put his head down. In their Easter suits.
I hate that picture.
This is, you know, we would christen boats. The women would christen boats. You broke a wine bottle over the boat and christened it. This is Debbie christening the Deb St. J, and right behind her are Sarah and Colin at that point watching it. I guess I'm taking the photograph. This is probably 1998 or so, a family photo. That's my mother and dad when they dedicated the centennial of the First Presbyterian Church at that point. This is my daughter and her husband Kyle when they got married in 2007. This is my grandson Jackson and my granddaughter Ainsley, taken many years ago. This is the three sons, all became Eagle Scouts. We were all very much involved in scouting. This is the Brat Pack. Susie's back there. She recognizes this one. There was actually 4 of us that were credited for turning the chamber around in this community in the 80s, beginning in 86 for the next 4 years. Mike Meek on the far left followed me, and then Susie followed him. Then there was also Clay Gillis, who passed away in a plane wreck years ago. But we were called the Brat Pack because we were in our 30s, and we basically took charge and made some things happen that's still around today.
And I was Demi. I was
what?
Demi Moore. I was Demi Moore, the Brat Pack.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Excuse you. You forgot.
You still are.
Right.
So anyway, I think that was worth mentioning. I'm glad Susie here to see it. Now, the guy, Grunewald Printing, who did my book, he had this melodrama, and he had all this vision. That's Rockport Beach Park with the Irene J and this big old wave going over. And I nixed that. That's too much melodrama. So we never had that cover. We went and wound up with this one instead. And that's pretty much the way it looks today. That was taken many years ago, but that really hasn't changed much. So that's pretty much it, folks. Hope I didn't keep you too long. And if you want to buy a book, they're back there for $20. Mr. Senior gets them. And feel free to ask me any questions you want one-on-one.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Vicky.
Johnny.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You did a great job. And I'm up to about half.
What are you doing?
But I know about half.
I'm sure glad I didn't fall into you.
If you're interested in information about the History Center, we have these pamphlets, and also we have some Pico necklaces for sale in the parlor area there. Are you writing, John?
Yeah, definitely. That's why they did it. Yeah. Too much.